Hello, Facebook. How's it going? Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much. I'm Rhonda Hamilton. I am the executive director for MI Mother's Keeper. We are a mental health nonprofit out of the district. And let me just take care of some business right now because, this COVID-19 is in control. So I want to thank my beautiful panel and my wonderful candidates that have been able to make it to their virtual seats. We have quite a few folks that are still trying to get through. Guys, the delay has to do with us being crashed. We just weren't ready for all of the attention. I have 4 different platforms that we promoted, and one of the platforms that's outside of the social media venue was not functioning at 5 p.m. And as a result, folks were flooding the Zoom room. In the Zoom room, we were having trouble getting our panelists in place. So those of you out there that are going to follow in our footsteps or that have already done this, you know where we are. But never mind that. Let's take care of some business. Guys, you're in for a treat. Mental health and capital. We've got some beautiful, intelligent, wonderful professionals, candidates that are going to be running. They're going to be talking to you about their platform. We want to start this by welcoming our prestigious and esteemed panel of guests. Guys, if you will join me in welcoming Dr. Edwin Chapman. And they tell me that Dr. Chapman has his lower third, his title up on him, and I'm sure we didn't have enough space to fit all of his accolades. Dr. Chapman is a wonderful, wonderful colleague, as well as a dedicated scholar and someone who's been working in the Washington, D.C. area over 40 years, helping families of addiction and crisis. So he's very, very much familiar with where we find ourselves at today in the midst of this COVID-19. Welcome, Dr. Chapman. I know I didn't do you justice, but you know my heart is full.
Thank you so much. You did plenty.
Welcome. I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. I just want us to settle into this and give my folks time to find out and know that we actually are live and it is, we real. Thank you, sir. Guys, if you would help me to keep this wonderful, wonderful affection going. I also have a wonderful esteemed colleague, Dr. Sam Noy is with us. And again, we knew that if we were going to try to pull off a 2-hour meeting on social media, we better bring the big guns. Dr. Sam Noy, thank you. I'm going to welcome all of you all to give us a little more in depth about who, just what your accolades are. But I know that you guys are soldiers at this, and I know that you don't do this for accolades. I thank you so much for showing up for MI Mother's Keeper to help us to bring this wonderful information today.
Thing to think about is, sex work is sex work.
Thank you.
Justice Kagan.
I also would like to thank, I'm sorry, guys, if you can imagine, we've been doing so much in the background and all of my notes are all over the place. But I would like to also thank Mr. Anthony Lorenzo Green. He is a Ward 7 candidate. And I know you guys know who Anthony is. He doesn't need me to introduce him, but all the same, I want to thank him because this is a soldier. You guys know him for that. He's out in the community and he's doing a very brave thing, coming out and taking on the challenge to be able to head the ward. So thank you, sir. We're definitely happy to have you here today. All righty, and keeping it going, I want to point out that Vita Rashid, Rebecca Morris, and Kelvin Brown had all confirmed to be here. It is possible that they, in the mix of trying to come through, that they weren't able to get through. And perhaps—
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh,
yeah.
Yaida, I thought I had Yaida. Vita, I'm sorry. I see you, Rebecca. Okay, are you, Rebecca? I didn't realize. I'm sorry about that. Guys, it's my fault because my notes are all scrambled with an hour delay. So I apologize, Rebecca. Yes, you are here with your beautiful self. Welcome. Thank you so much. I'm going to give you an opportunity a little later to speak. My apologies. So let me clarify. In Ward 7 on the panel, we have with us Mr. Anthony Green and Miss Rebecca Morris. Do we have Mr. Kelvin Brown or Miss Vita Rashid? Okay, great. I just wanted to be clear. Thank you both for being here.
I think I'm not sure if Anthony's on the phone. I mean Lorenzo's on the phone. I mean on
That's
the phone,
fine.
but I believe he left because he had to.
That's fine. It's possible that that may be the case. And, the reality is that we're going to move forward anyway, because mental health is a very important topic. So that will just leave more space for you guys to be able to expound in. And so that's a wonderful thing. Thank you for that information. Mr. Stuart Anderson, keeping it going. Thank you so very much. You've been helping us out there, pass the food out and get our folks fed. And this is a dedicated soldier. Thank you so very much. We're going to hear from you a little bit in just a little bit about your platform. Thanks for being here today, sir. Mr. Mike Austin, thank you so very much. We appreciate being able to have made the contact with you and to be able to have you here today. Our folks in Ward 8 need to be able to hear from the proposed or the projected folks that are looking to come in and provide leadership, because that's exactly what's needed right about now. Ms. Yaida Ford, welcome. Thank you, beautiful, for being here today. So guys, without any further ado, Dr. Orlando Barker, thank you for being patient for me. Boy, if you guys could see these notes. Thank you, sir. Mr. Barker is, Dr. Barker is with the Department of Behavioral Health. We are humbled to have a representative from the Department of Behavioral Health here. That should let our social media folks know that we mean to do business and take care of business today. Thank you guys so much for being here. All righty, without any further ado, what I want to do is jump right in, because I've got social media out there. They're waiting. They want to know, what's going on. We're already an hour and 15 minutes in. Guys, we've got a Zoom telephone. If in fact you are interested in calling in your questions real time for any of our panelists, you are going to be able to do so today. I'm going to ask that my tech team get you a number on the screen as I continue to talk and move us forward. But you will be able to dial in. We're going to do several interactive things today, social media. We're also going to be doing a survey of questions that is going to allow you to be able to express yourself. So let's take advantage of this time together. And without any further ado, I'm going to throw a question out to the panel, and then we're going to do this several different ways. We're going to go right into conversation mode right now. I'm going to throw a question out, and what I would ask everyone to do is to be kind and be respectful, and we're all going to have enough time to speak, because obviously we have a shorter panel. So guys, one of the things I wanted to talk about, I saw on the news that with the closing of Hope Village, one of the things that was of concern for our team and just for some of the community members as a whole is the district already having represented some challenges in helping with the mental health services and resources, especially east of the river. What does that bring to mind as our candidates, one, put platforms in place to come forward with all of this real-time understanding? And then Dr. Chapman, being a specialist of addictions, and Dr. Samnoy and Dr. Tu, having representation in those mediums where we're getting the traffic of the folks that are transitioning from prison or recovering from addictions in a city where limited resources are available. And when I say limited, social media, My Mother's Keeper does advocacy work east of the river in Ward 8 and Ward 7, primarily in 8, because we saw that the resources were so short to the families. We had family members dealing with grief and all other kinds of issues, sleeping in hallways with children, storing their clothes in the laundromat. And I know that we've got services. What happens is if we don't manage things properly, then somebody's going to go without. And the reality for My Mother's Keeper is that we've got to make sure that we as a city are recognizing where these loopholes are, because what we believe mental health to be is representing something different present day. So the question that I'm throwing out, with the closing of Hope Village in a city that's already challenged with mental resources, what are we doing for our transitional citizens moving forward and our citizens that are recovering addicts?
Rhonda, this is Yaida Ford from Ward 8. I'll start. One of the first things I'd like to say is that, I think I would disagree with the assessment about the city's limited resources. Frankly, our city is operating with a surplus, right? We have a $200 million surplus. But one of the deficits, however, when it comes to providing services for our returning citizens is because the mayor's office of returning citizens really isn't equipped to assess the needs of returning citizens before their release. And the reason for that is because we have, when a DC resident commits a felony, they go into the federal system, okay? DC, we are not a state. We have not attained statehood at this point in time. We have no way of really tracking the needs of our residents who go into that federal system. So therefore, we have no way of assessing their needs prior to release. So because we cannot assess their needs, we can't meet the needs. And that's a huge deficit in the system. And so the system is broken. We are unable to meet the needs of our returning citizens, particularly when it comes to really any needs. But when you talk about mental health, that's a big one. And because we have no data, we cannot do any organizational planning. The mayor's office of returning citizens can't do any organizational planning to meet the needs of those residents because of the fact that that federal track is not something that's within our grasp. So until that is addressed, and obviously I'm a proponent of statehood, and fighting for the voiceless. And one of our voiceless population, part of that population is the returning citizens who come from that federal system. So, and that has created deficits in our ward. We have an 8% male-headed household. It's and the statistics are staggering. So able to track the data so that we know how to meet the needs of these men and women who are coming home, because it's simply not happening. So when you talk about our response, really there is no response. The response that we are providing it's woefully inadequate.
I would ask one of the other panelists to chime in.
Yes.
One of the other things, this is Stuart Anderson. One of the other things that's more important in the question, and I don't totally disagree with anything that has just been said. What I do say is this: unless we address the National Revitalization and Self-Government Improvement Act of 1997, there is very little that can be done on the local level as it relates. Along with that piece of legislation, congressional legislation, right, was also created something called the CIC. The CIC has no teeth, and therefore we are hampered from getting the data that was just referenced. So the key is that we have to turn to the question of how do we get authority to then interact with our prisoners, and that only comes from an addressment to the Federal Bureau of Prisons and the federal government to change that narrative. That is what we have to focus on before we can even begin to talk about addressing the needs of returning citizens. We have to address that federal bureaucracy, cut it out the way, remove it. Statehood is an avenue to it. There are a lot of things that have to happen with statehood, but we really have to begin to lobby them congressional people on the Hill who just showed us, by virtue of what they did with the aid package, that they don't give a damn about DC.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, I should have been a little more clear. Thank you for that very, very wonderful remark. And then you had to go throw old D-bomb in there. Guys, I know we get passionate and we're going to because we are a spirited city, but I'm just going to ask us if we could remember that we have no idea who our audience is and we shouldn't have to worry about that. And I don't want anyone to form an opinion over a slip because I know you're dedicated. So thank you, guys. And I love that. I'm just curious, Dr. Barker, you got anything you want to add to this?
Can I add something to it?
I'll bring you in just a minute, Dr. Barker.
Yes, one of the things I want to add is the discussion on the federal system. Another thing to point out with the federal system, because this is something that we've begun talking about, but one of the issues in the federal system is that obviously DC is not a state, so individuals who are going to federal prison are literally going to federal prisons all over the country. Mm-hmm. So there are people who are going to federal prisons in Arizona. So imagine the challenge of those individuals coming back and not having that support. So that's one thing. But what I can speak on, because I do represent, I'm a part of the Department of Behavioral Health in DC locally. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about our local jail system and returning citizens, the local jail system, we are starting to, and there are some resources that are out there that I just want to promote. So just to be clear, I work. I'm the state opioid response project coordinator. So we are working a lot with returning citizens dealing with opioid use disorder issues. So there's the DC Ready Center currently at the jail. It started in last February 2019. We're trying to promote the Ready Center. The Ready Center is basically it's a component of the jail now that is Department of Behavioral Health, DHS, Department of Human Services, DMV. We're having all these DC agencies with satellites within the Ready Center. So when individuals get out of jail, they can go straight to the Ready Center and start to receive those services. So we want to promote that because this is something that's new and it's innovative. And I think that once more people are aware of it, they can take advantage of those resources there, because what traditionally would happen is people would get out of jail and then you can give them information, but it's very hard to get people tied to something if they have to travel all around the city to get vital documents, Social Security, any sort of documents, driver's license. It's hard to get that if you have to go around the whole city.
You're right.
You can go directly to the Ready Center, which is on the campus. And you can get those services right there and then. You can actually get your driver's license right there at the center. So I just want to promote that as ways that we're trying to help people in this population as they're leaving the local jail system.
Now, before Jaida wanted to follow up. Come on,
no, it's Rebecca. Rebecca wanted to.
Come on, Rebecca.
One of the main things, I'm Rebecca Morris. I'm running for Ward 7. Yeah. And one of the main things that I actually want to have in our wards, and it's all over DC, is to have neighborhood mental health hubs where people not just coming out of jail, but children can go to once a week and have meetings so they can have group discussions where people who are gay or people who are men, who are women, can just have group discussions amongst themselves within the community. Oftentimes there's no outlet when people die in our city. It's just someone dies, we go to the corner, people drink, people smoke, and then go to work the next day. There is no real outlet for that's a proper channel. And if in each neighborhood, if within each neighborhood, if there's somewhere people can walk to, whether a church can be a hub, whether the community center be a hub, there should be something walkable that everyone should go to once a week to be able to let out whatever they want to let out, or to speak out on whatever they want to speak out. And we often see it not just when we see the people on a bus. You see mothers going off on just the very minute things. We see children and we see teenagers going after adults or violently attacking adults because they don't know that they're halfway schizophrenic or bipolar. If we have these little neighborhood hubs where people can actually discuss or talk about things, certain diagnoses could happen.
Yeah, I understand.
It would actually remove a lot of the crime because people will have an outlet to speak out on certain things and won't have it bottled up to transfer that bad energy on someone else. And then on top of the system that we have, especially when it comes to our criminal justice system, it's based off Hitler's and Nazi Germany's system when it comes down to drugs, and putting people away for years at a time when the government basically conspired to create these drugs in our cities.
Okay, can I stop you there? From you raised some very wonderful points, and I want to be able to have someone else have an opportunity to chime in. As you touched on a couple of wonderful points, thank you. You've made some very wonderful points. The hub is a great idea. I wonder with my wonderful doctors sitting amongst us, Dr. Sam Noy, any thought to local hubs or how we get proactive with our prison population, or do you feel that we're doing just fine from a medical standpoint?
Thank you for asking. So I work over at George Washington University Hospital, and so we see a lot of people right out of prison, and the number one thing we hear in the emergency room is, I just got out yesterday, I just got out a few days ago, and I don't know where to go. There's nowhere for me to be. And they end up in our emergency room, which of course is always hectic and not the best way. We're open 24/7, but it's not the best way. The community has a much better way to address this. Now, with that being said, I got to commend the Department of Behavioral Health and their services, our core service agencies, and ARC, which are really, when we have folks at GW, we have seamless transitions. We're able to get them in a cab. Oftentimes our case managers come, take them over to ARC for assessment, and then they go right to a bed. So we do have some wonderful resources in place. But I think the question is how to keep people in the community tapped into those resources. And those who get lost really get lost. And that's our prison population.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Thank you for that. Dr. Chapman, you got anything you want to add to this? Dr. Chapman, did you have anything you want to add to it?
Yes, I'm glad that we're approaching this topic. Certainly, as you mentioned, with opioid addiction, the highest overdose rate is in the first 2 weeks post-discharge from prison. And we've developed a system where patients are not actually treated appropriately. We now know that there's a 90% relapse rate with opioid addiction. So if someone is incarcerated, they can and should be started on treatment as an option while they're incarcerated. They should be started on or connected to health insurance before they walk out of that door. And of course, housing and the other support services. So we're here and ready to accept patients once they step out to continue their medication if they've been started in the criminal justice system. And if they have not been, we certainly would start them on outpatient buprenorphine or Vivitrol. But the standard of care now is medication-assisted treatment for opioid addiction.
I love that we're starting here because obviously this is one of conversations in our city, and each of you brought some very valid points. But I want to point this back to the candidates that are here because I can't help as I hear you guys speak and as I hear the wonderful input from the doctors on the panel. Are we going to be because I'm an advocate, let's be clear. In my mother's keeper, our job, we feel, is to sound the alarms. You know, when we've seen enough and we understand that, you know, DC is a major city. And just to give a little bit about my background, but not too much, you know, because I don't want to take up the time. My mom I am the daughter of schizophrenia. So we've grown up in this mental health system. My mom was diagnosed when I was 10 years old. And so we've watched this city struggle with how they would bring forth resources and services, and more importantly, how they are accountable or not east of the river. And so Dr. Barker made a very valid point in representing that it's not necessarily, and then also Yaida spoke up as well, it may not necessarily be that we are don't have the resources. Maybe we have a management of the resources issue. And I say that because I was at a prayer breakfast, Martin Luther King, east of the river here, and the council member, which I'm not sure why we don't have him here today, but I'm sure he has a good reason. But I recall him saying in that speech that Ward 8 has over 200 registered nonprofits. So the frustrating thing about growing up in this town is that everyone always has the politics down. Everyone knows why things are going on. We've been hearing this conversation about taxation without representation. We've been getting ready to be ready for years about that. And then the second thing is, we've been talking about our returned citizens forever. And then I'm going to go thirdly. We have been consistently winning the race in addiction. They unequivocally, DC residents are going to self-medicate. It's in the books, and it just didn't start. And the challenge that I face as an advocate, when we're mental health wellness advocates, meaning that we're catching everything on the radar that's coming through the community level because mental health doesn't cut off at 5 p.m. But the most frustrating thing being on the ground and seeing it real time is to have an election go on, have folks running, everybody's got the what down, they got the why down. What are we going to do about it? what's going to change? Because we didn't get statehood. So now we got to go all the way back and start again and do, and the sacrificial pawns in all of these conversations are our families east of the river. And I take it personal because my mother and my family, her mother and her brother were also schizophrenic. So this has just been our story. And the frustrating thing is that we've got to change the narrative, and we've got to do it before they go to the polls to vote. And that's why Am I Mother's Keeper wanted to do this, because I'm sure you are very wonderful people in your own respect. But we've got folks that are living through trauma, and they've been needed help. And these platforms are great, but what I want to know is, what are we going to do, guys? How do we get past this? What has to happen?
First and foremost, Rhonda, I want to say this is that, with over 700,000 people in the district, 100,000 people according to the Center for Disease Control.
I'm losing you, Stu. Can you hold on? I'm losing you. I want to hear what you're saying. Come closer to your mic or wherever.
Look, this
There you
close.
go. That's good.
So what I'm saying is this. So we got about 100,000 people in the district right now who are struggling as it relates to mental health. We've got a whole nother 10,000 people in federal custody somewhere in the prison system who are not getting help, not going to get help until they come home, which is way too late. So what we have to do is be intent about creating, we're about to lose the only or predominant male halfway house. We have to create space. And I short of building a prison, Yango and I started talking 3 years ago about the idea of creating what we called re-entry spaces, right? Or residential treatment spaces to receive some of the DC prisoners from federal authority as early as 18 months to 2 years out, so that we bring them back here in close proximity to not only medical help, but spiritual help. See, our prisoners don't get the benefit of being involved in spiritual help while they're incarcerated. What spiritual health they do get in the federal system, it's a disconnect when they're released. We need them here so that our ministers here can pour into them, and then they will have that real connection once they release and have a safety net. That's how we treat the mental health of some of the prisoners when they're coming out, and catch them before they face the brick wall and go back to substance use.
Let me ask you something. And then I want to invite Miss Carlinia Springer to the conversation. She's another panelist here. God bless you, Carlinia, if you're there. Stu, I want to touch on what you're saying, because again, I'm going to go back to, I've heard we're going to build a center. If we have 200 resources, can we not find out what that's about? Is there an audit that can be taken? So why would we continue to bring more in?
It's an advertising thing. People aren't advertising it.
The 200 nonprofits that we're speaking about, right? They're not equipped to deal with.
Hold on. Stop right there. Because social media, where you at? Come on, tech team, please put my phone number up. We got to get some more voices in this conversation. Stu, if you're going to say that they're not equipped, what is the requirement to maintain nonprofit status in the city where so many people are going without resources, and there's a surplus, as I think I heard Yaida mention in the budget? Why would we be touting a surplus when so many people still have issues?
Rhonda, if I can just jump in on a little bit on this part.
First, we gotta have
Let's wrap it up, and I'm gonna go to Yaida. Thank you, Yaida.
Okay.
But first, we gotta have the infrastructure, and none of those 200 current nonprofits have the infrastructure to be able to absorb some of the prison population. We have to
Well, Stu, if that's the case, I hope they're not sitting on contracts that's taking money out of my family's mouths. We need accountability, Stu. I hear what you're saying, and if that's the reality, then I'm appalled that we would have 200 organizations on the book in 8, and we don't have what we need. Yaida, what you gonna bring to the table for us?
So I want to say one or two things. I think the first thing is that addressing trauma when somebody comes out of prison is definitely too late, right? I think my approach would be, let's address that trauma before, early on, at the earliest ages, so that they're not even going to prison, so that they're not taken away from their community. One of the things that is very sensitive and very little talked about, and policymakers have to connect with this better, is the socio-ecological reasons as to why people don't seek the help that they need. So mental health, we know that there's trauma-induced mental health issues, right, which our kids deal with a lot. And then we have organic mental health issues, and they're not necessarily treated the same way. But the from a socio-ecological standpoint, there is still some stigma in the Black community about mental illness and even about getting treatment. And we have to address the stigma behind it. When a young man, in my practice, I represent people who are beaten by the police, people who are shot, killed. So there's all kinds of trauma going on. And usually by the time they've had that encounter with the criminal justice system, there has already been trauma in their lives. Mm-hmm. And one of the gut-wrenching things is hearing from, I had a client who was raped by her father's best friend in her grandmother's household and was told by her mom, you don't need to get help for that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't need, so there's still a stigma, behind that. And so that is something that as a community, we have to address and break down the stigma so that our kids know, listen, if one of your friends is murdered or something happens, it is okay to need help and to seek help. And we can't just talk it away or talk it over with Big Mama or talk it over with Auntie. They need professional care. And so the socio-ecological, the interpersonal issues that we deal with as Black people, some of that is cultural, and that care needs to be culturally sensitive. It has to be. People have to understand the stuff that we deal with as
Can I add something after?
Please do, Rebecca. Come on to the conversation.
Okay. I had wanted to touch on a lot how Yaida said that people aren't going in early. We should be in elementary schools. A lot of reasons why people don't know about some of these nonprofits, because some of the nonprofits aren't actually going and reaching out to the places and where these people are. You should be in front of every liquor store. You can go to any liquor store and see some mental illness going on. You can stand in front of any gas station and see someone homeless, and you can see somebody with some mental illness going on. You should be on every single bus, almost every bus that you're on. You see some sort of mental illness. We should be in every spot in every community in which they're highly populated. There was one I came off work, and there was a man, he was going off, and a police officer just stayed in his car and just pulled on a bullhorn and just told him to go up the street. Mm-hmm. There's another instance. There's a man who, I used to work at Denny's a few years ago. There's a man, he was slowly going into dementia. He had his system, but it was slowly going in, slowly losing him. So he would come in and try and pay about 5-6 times of his food, forgetting that he already paid. For people like that, when we see things like that in our area, who do we call when we see these things in our area? When we see these things in our community, there's not enough advertising. If you have this nonprofit, you should be in every corner talking to the people where they're at. If these people are at the corner, that's where you should be.
If I could add something.
Point. Who's that? Stu, you chimed in. And guys, your text chat does work. If you want to get a point across, you can use it. Stu, you made a point about...
I'd like to add something for a moment.
Hold on. We can't all talk together. One of the things I want to do, I want to allow you to make your comment, Dr. Barker, and then Stu, I'm going to let you wrap it up. And then I have a segue to my panel of doctors. Go ahead, Dr. Barker. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I just want to add this because I know the talk about having a hub, a place where people can go. Mm-hmm. So that is one of the innovations we've tried to work on in the past few years. And there are hubs. So one of the issues is we call it peer-operated centers. Mm-hmm. So these are centers where peers or people with lived experience with mental health and substance use issues run these organizations in places where you can come, you can talk to people. They have programs. So just to give you a few examples, I know one of the guests to this, I just want to shout her out, Gail Advent. There's Total Family Care Coalition. There's Dreamers and Achievers. There's FAN, They focus on young people. So some of these are some of the resources in, Southeast DC. So I just want to point those out because they do exist. And I think Ms. Morris was definitely correct when she says that one of the issues is marketing.
Yeah.
They exist and they do work, but the reality is that people don't always know about resources. And I mean, even when we talk about the local jail system, for instance, one of the things in DC that we've done, which a lot of cities aren't doing this, is that we offer medication-assisted treatment in the jails. So this is, when we talk about opioid addiction, we have buprenorphine, Suboxone, Vivitrol, et cetera. All these, the FDA approved drugs for treating opioid addiction, we offer that in DC jail. They don't offer those in a lot of federal prisons. They may not offer those, but in DC jails we do. And I think what Dr. Chapman mentioned, there needs to be a seamless transition from that person because they may have been getting treatment in the jail, but when they leave, it needs to be a seamless transition into getting services outside of the jail. And that is something that we've been working on, and it does exist now. Can it be improved? Definitely. I think that transition is always the challenging part because, you have an organization, they can get you to the first visit, but it's up to that, continuous going to these different areas. So I think we, in some respects in DC, we have these things put in place. It's just the follow-up and the continued advertisement so people know they exist because we don't always know that these resources are out there, and they are.
That seems to be the common theme. And so I'm gonna come back to that because I want us to spend some time there because I think that it deserves that we do so. But I want to do a leading question. Dr. Chapman, I want to pull you back to the conversation if I could, because again, I'm gonna err on the side of wisdom because the reality is that someone staring this down, staring it down the eyes and watching it and dealing with it for as long as he has. He's seen quite a few administrations come and go. The reality is this: everyone is saying some wonderful things, but here's the reality. The reality is that 2023 UHC is scheduled to close, if I'm correct, and we got Hope Village is closed now. Your elections will happen in November. You'll hit the ground with no ability to house your returned citizens. And I'm just wondering, Dr. Chapman, how concerned should we be that, I really want to drive this point home because we go home to various realities. The truth of the matter is, if we don't figure this out, these folks end up in the community unhealthy, upset, and then we got guns going on, and there's not enough cameras and people walking the streets to address the true issue, which is we've got to get these services around these folks before they are a danger to us and themselves. So, Dr. Chapman, would you bring a voice of reasoning, because it seems like they're very well educated on what has to happen, but I'm just not sure there's a plan here.
Don't forget to circle back.
Well, I think it's really been brought out that many of these problems start in childhood. So we're talking about adverse childhood experiences,
that's where we're going.
Adverse community environments, and unless we really have a psychological history of that person before they come out, so that they can be connected to a psychologist. When I started opioid treatment in my office about 16 years ago, it was through a pilot project with the Superior Court. And that person was first evaluated by a psychologist. They still had their parole officer. And then they connected the client to my office, medication-assisted treatment. So I've been doing buprenorphine for 16 years in the office. I now have 275 patients, the max for federally qualified profile. But I've treated over 1,000 patients over that period of time. So I've seen it all. And many of them, the average age was 52. They had at least 10 years incarceration. We have an older population. 60% of the patients when they came in were hepatitis C positive 10% HIV positive. So they had all of these medical problems. In addition, 90% of the patients smoked. So they had cardiopulmonary problems. So what we created out of that was an integrated practice. I'm an internist by trade, but I was invited back to Howard University in the Department of Behavioral Health and Psychiatry about 8 years ago. And that's when we developed this model. So we've been operating this model now with telemedicine, which is basically what we're doing right now. You can actually connect that patient when they come into the office with a psychologist without moving the patient. So while the patient is coming in to get their prescription, we have the office set up so that a psychologist or their psychologist or psychiatrist can see them at the same visit. Now, technically, the problem is that Medicaid will not pay for 2 visits on the same day. And I was on the committee of the National Academy of Science. Report was released in January. We recommended to Congress and to HHS that patients could be evaluated and paid for both a medical visit and a psychiatric or psychologist visit on the same day. That means that that patient does not have to come back for a second visit because they got babysitting problems, they have transportation problems. These are the kinds of details that, from a practical standpoint, I've been doing this for 8 years. I've never been invited into the Department of Behavioral Health to tell what I know. I get invited every place else, but not into the Department of Behavioral Health. So I can tell you where the potholes are.
I love that you make that point, and Dr. Barker, we're going to come back and talk about it because I love how open and inviting you are with your conversation. My thing is that I'm a daughter of schizophrenia, so we've seen some things. We've managed and maneuvered the community connections of the world, the Anchor workshops, the Fairfax Unlimiteds, the House of Roofs, and the standard of care for me in this city could be better. And so, Dr. Chapman, I thank you for pointing that out because we love your energy, but we really want some change candidates. And so being the daughter of schizophrenia, having lost my father to his opioid addiction, his heroin, him being a military man and lacking resources, my challenge is that we wanted to bring this platform forward because of the very things that are coming out. One, there are resources, but where are they and why isn't the word getting out? We do need to do something about the federal prison circumstance. We don't seem to have an immediate understanding of how so we're hosting these forums because in the meantime of us figuring it out, we got community members that are falling apart. One of the things I want to bring to the forefront of this conversation, or this specific part of the conversation, is K2 specifically. Why? Because we're getting calls from community members that are ending up in mental health systems as a result of a bad trip, and not just overnight and not just 2 months. And so what I'm saying is that if we're going to really look at this and do an overhaul, we need to really look at it and really bring something forward that's going to encompass accountability, because I don't understand why they still have access to it. I don't understand, when we know what it does, why this is such a revolving door circumstance when we already know mental health is a problem in the city.
I want to chime in on that.
Earlier, and I was in the queue, but you kept moving past me.
Yeah, I have to, because we have to keep it moving.
Dr. Chapman pointed out part of what I wanted to say. So first and foremost, we can't lump all this on those 200 nonprofits because none of them are adequate. I'm not going to say none of them. Most of them are not focused on addressing mental health across the board. We have to first identify those who are, figure out what they are and aren't doing. Other thing that I wanted to point out, right, is that as a practitioner with early childhood intervention stuff, right, I run something called CCAP right now today that's designed to address strengthening families by working with parents and their children to help them be able to better communicate and deal with addressing this trauma. We need more of that to take place.
Okay, now Stu, I'm gonna stop you. I do have to stop you because I want everyone to be able to speak up, and we have other questions and other points to be made. But I appreciate that. Dr. Samnoy texted in, and I'm going to encourage you guys when we have these questions that are long-ended like this, if we could all kind of come to the text, it gives me the opportunity to be better managing, to keep the time moving. But Dr. Samnoy made a good point, Dr. Barker. If in fact the physicians are not aware or familiar with the actual resources or what's available, then they most likely aren't going to make the referral. So again, it just sounds like if it's as simple as a management issue, with so many folks out of work and such a surplus in our budget, we just seem to always be so contradictory in how we approach it. Because if in fact we're saying we have the resources and we know for certain that there's a certain section of the city that's going without, then if it's as simple as getting folks in place and rerouting resources, and then I hear you, Stu, making the point that some of the 200 are not necessarily geared to receive it, where's the management in this town about on any day of the week what is available and who needs it?
Rhonda, let me just say one other thing that I forgot.
Thanks.
Prior authorizations for the 3 medications that we're talking about, the American Medical Association, the National Academy of Science, everybody in treatment has said that prior authorization, that means calling the insurance company when you're qualified, when you're a qualified physician, have all the certifications, but yet you have to get the insurance company's approval for the medication, is a barrier to care. And I've tried for 5 years to get prior authorizations removed. They say that they've been removed in the District of Columbia, but I can tell you that that's not true. So buprenorphine still, patients are running around trying to get their prescriptions filled, and their various forms. They've now resorted to generics, which many of which are made in India and China, and they're not the same quality medication. And this is the one medication out of the last 45 years that I've been practicing medicine that the patient can tell you the difference, because they're taking a replacement medication. They know the difference. They don't know the difference with high blood pressure medicines or diabetes medicines, but with buprenorphine, they know the difference. And I don't think they're making it up to sell it on the street. These are patients that I've had for 15 years. They know the difference.
They know the difference.
But there's but we can't get the response from the health department. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, and it just seems like we got to be able to be willing to do more of this. And I would hope that the candidates coming in would be, I'm anxious to hear from each of you guys. We're going to do that at the top of the hour.
I want to speak on
I want to move us
K2.
forward. No, do me a favor and send me a text about it, please. I'm moving forward to the next one. We've spent some time. I'm keeping an eye on it. I just want to kind of make sure we're coming in. Social media, I'd like for you to text me 240-274-94. Let me know what you want to ask. Also call me if you like. I'm getting messages in the background. To my folks that are sitting in the chat room, you're welcome to chime in. If my tech team can help them understand how they could get their questions out to me, I appreciate it. Moving on to question number 2. Thank you, everyone. We're going to keep this moving. DC, basically, when we talk about the adverse childhood experiences that Dr. Chapman touched on, and obviously we know that that's obviously trying to determine or ascertain the amount or exposure of trauma that a child or someone has had prior to age 18. In addition to that, we know that the Harvard study indicated that people living in areas of poverty are at greater risk for experiencing this toxic stress. In addition to that, that same study indicated that the impact of poverty happens in the womb. I'm going somewhere with this. And for my social media audience, everything that we're referencing and that I've raised today will have a link for your reference at the end of today's discussion for your further review. Guys, in a city that's already challenged with resources, challenged with mental health resources, I should say, not necessarily that they don't exist, but we're figuring out how to get them routed to the people that truthfully need them. On top of that, we've got the folks coming home from prison that we're not really sure what we're going to do with because Hope Village is closing. In the meantime, we have that surplus that's probably going to get exasperated because of COVID-19 and everything we have to do now. The point I'm making is on top of that, we know that east of the river, taking into account the statistical data that they just indicated, that it happens in the womb and that toxic stress is evident for folks that are raised in poverty. So I'm going to read some numbers, and I just want to understand, how do we get to a point of accountability? If poverty is bringing on toxic stress, and we know that it can start as early as in the womb for folks who are, because we know we got generational poverty in our community. So you know where I'm going with this, I hope. I got 50% of households east of the river making less than $15,000 a year, 50%. I also have 72 of those households that have children. So if I got a community full of children walking around with toxic stress, and probably has been doing so since they were born, growing up in our neighborhoods, because we've been dealing with this for a while. What is the plan as you come forward? Because more of the same cannot be okay. And now nobody planned for COVID-19. But knowing what we know about ACEs, my dear panel, knowing what we know about how early they can be exposed to poverty, how do we change this narrative? I hear all the sound bites, prison to pipeline, and we're going to stop this. What is the plan? Anybody? Because we keep pushing all these statistics around, but my babies are still stuck. Do you know my kids didn't know who Tiger Woods was? And I distinctly remember that this isn't a black or white thing, this is a human thing. Because if we're not able to provide stability into the lives of the children who are going to be the future, then what are we doing?
Rhonda, are you able to hear me?
I'm sorry?
Are you able to hear me? My name is...
I hear you now.
Yeah, I'm Fred Hill.
Welcome to the conversation, Mr. Hill.
All right, and I'm glad to hear you speak about that, because I'm also a Ward 8 candidate for the county. But more importantly, I've had experience as a business owner of hiring over 350 Ward 8 residents. 100 of those were returning citizens. And one of the things that I know makes a difference, no matter where you are, is that poverty and unemployment go hand in hand. And if we don't do the things by not just creating jobs that are minimum wage, we need living wage opportunities. Those living wage opportunities are going to be able to help people pay the living wages or living rents that they pay, the mortgages. They're also going to be able to afford better health care. They're going to be able to treat and take care of their children that have those needs that need to be addressed a lot easier and a lot faster than what's going on right now. I called for Hope Village to be shut down 2 years ago. And one of the things that I kept running into is that management from that facility did more harm to the reentry citizens than it did help them.
Talk to us a little bit about that, and let's stay in that space for a minute.
Okay, so when a person comes home, it's really simple. My interviews last 20 seconds. If you don't show me your past, I don't care about it. One of the things that I would do is as we would pick the gentleman up to go to work, we would run into an issue where the management of that facility would sometimes have them held to be released an hour later. And then sometimes that would force them not to be able to get to work that day. One of the things that I instituted for many years ago is that the day that a person is released and they set foot on the sidewalks of Washington, D.C., I'm the first person they call. The next thing that we do is we have an appointment with their parole officer, and we explain to them the work schedule that's going to be there. I also have churches, I also have community folk and agencies that have the assistance programs that these gentlemen are going to need as soon as they get home.
Okay.
Right? When you hear people say that they don't have the knowledge, it's not being shared before they come home. But as we saw that in our workforce, we decided to put together a platform. When they land, they've got steps that they can take. And a lot of our nonprofits did not afford them to that.
And I like that you broke that down, and I'm glad you stayed in that space. A lot of times in Ward 8, you know, we've seen it, we've been there, done it, you know, and I think that what folks are doing, they're looking for energy, they're looking for new energy. Like you said, you were trying to get Hope Village closed. A lot of times in DC, what we're facing is, and you're a great resource, I hear it, but the need is so much greater that just as our organization, we sat down in Cedar Heights, what used to be Butler Gardens, you know, and we had some wonderful families over there. They're my heart. But how can we feel great about the work we're doing in one community when 12 and 15 others haven't been touched? And again, Mr. Stuart Anderson, I'm going to keep beating the dead horse. 200 is too many when so many are still going without. I'm sorry.
Rhonda, can I chime in? I want to touch on something you asked. You mentioned earlier.
Let me just close out and say the accountability has to be real. Stu, come to me, text. Come on. You can chime in.
What I'm saying is that now that we have money,
let me stop you and come to the text. Yaida was getting ready to speak.
That's what I've been doing.
I'm watching your text. I see you.
Yeah, I just wanted to address your original point, Rhonda. It was really good. And you mentioned, you know, the babies. You know, the babies being left behind. And, you know, DC, I think one of the things that DC needs to focus on, particularly when you talked about what's the plan, you know, and how do we get there? You know, DC, it's not that they don't have the money, it's that the money is not being allocated to serve the needs. You know, when Councilmember Kwame Brown was chair, you know, one of his focuses as council chair was to make sure that the funds were allocated to the schools with the largest need. Right now, there seems to be a struggle within our council to get those funds to the schools with the biggest need.
Can I stop you right there? I'm sorry, because you're touching on some great stuff. People want to hear this.
Yeah.
Why?
You know what?
Come on, why?
And I want to be, I'm not saying I want to be politically correct, but I think there's a combination.
Let me help you out.
There's a combination.
I'm going to help you out, and I'm going to take the dart, and then I'm going to help you give us your answer, because people want it real, and I know you're giving it, but I hear you struggling, and I hear it, but I'm the advocate, so I don't have those issues. Let me share with you. Councilman Mendelson is the chairman of the education committee. So I don't pick on him. That's just the job that he does. And so he's the person that I'm supposed to direct my concerns to. And so what you're speaking on is what we need to be addressing if we're going to be in this election year and be real about making changes, because in the very breath of meeting Councilman Mendelson in the community to talk about the wonderful surplus and the wonderful work that they had done, and he was coming to find out, you know, basically where we thought we might use and benefit from spending this money. But in the same breath, as he shared that, he was so disheartened that he's got to cut funding at Henley Elementary School. Now, let me tell you about the God I serve. I am a Henley Elementary School alumnus. You cannot cut funding in schools east of the river that are already challenged. You won't have any to grow up and find you. So I need you, Yaida, to help me understand why it is, Ms. Candidate for Ward 7. I'm sorry, Ward 8, I stand correct. I make mistakes, there's a lot of y'all. But why are we having challenges putting the money where it should go on our children? Why, with such a surplus, or with the surplus, are we losing a hospital? Are we cutting fundings in schools east of the river? And what is the situation with, what is that, 3 grocery stores?
Yes.
It's really, I mean, I don't know why they're even saying three.
Candidates, come on.
Yeah,
No,
I don't even know.
I want to chime in
Ward 8 has-
after
Ward
Yaida.
8
Chime in.
has
Let
one.
me
Me,
let Yaida finish, Rebecca, and then you can come in. And then Stu, I'll go throw it your way.
I mean, Rhonda, I mean, the issue is pretty simple, is that we just don't value, you know, as a council, political leaders don't necessarily value the lives of the children who are east of the river. And I think that's not, it's beyond the,
Wait a
it's
minute.
$10,000 per, you know, it's because we have this
Wait a
per-
minute.
we
We
have
can't make. Wait a minute, guys. We can't make statements like that and walk past that. Dr. Sam Noy, Dr. Barker, and Dr. Chapman, you're seeing and treating our children and our families. They're bringing their issues your way. And on top of that, we've got a candidate that says that there are folks that don't care about the issues of our children. How do we deal with this? Stay where you are. You're not gonna lose your space, but we gotta have a discussion. Because that's a big deal. Anybody?
Right, let me just be clear. When I say value, the way we spend our money, that shows what we value, right?
Absolutely, I'm with you.
And so when we're talking about what's the struggle with allocating enough resources to schools, so that they have enough mental health counselors in schools, so that teachers can learn and focus, and then you have the mental health support that they need to treat the issues that our students are dealing with, there shouldn't be a struggle there when you have a surplus.
You're right, and let's talk about that. Let's talk about
there's a tension there,
and
nobody wants to talk about what's creating the tension.
Well, that's what if you talk to the candidates before we have to go to the polls, maybe we can motivate the folks to go out and vote if they feel like they're going to get a good run. But this is why people don't go and vote, because they feel like they're going to get more of the same. And the problem with cliques, everybody don't know somebody. My mother didn't know anybody all those years she was out there in them streets needing help. And so I do this work in her namesake, Miss Regina Fleming.
So one of the things that is important is that when we're talking about education, right, we have to talk about why are the resources allocated the way that they are allocated.
Come on, tell us. School us. Why are they? Come on.
One of the issues is we're moving more and more toward privatization of prisons and privatization of school and other governmental affairs. I believe that all things public should remain public. So when we move into that privatized area, we see things where we see a lot of funding going toward charter schools. Charter schools then put those children out and the money stay with the charter school. In the DC public school system, they allocate a certain amount of money per pupil at the beginning of the school year, and that's a flat rate. One of the things that I plan to do, and I'll let it go out here so everybody else who's running for war, they can pick it up. Because for me, it needs to happen more so than me making it happen. And we need to we need to make sure that we implement a system where we have net flow funding for our schools. And what net flow funding does for our schools is this. That means if a pupil comes in at the middle of the school year, we allocate more funds to that school. If the pupil leave your school, you lose.
Okay, Mr. Anderson, let me stop because that's wonderful. Is that information on your website or somewhere where we can direct them to see more of it? So we don't have to use that all in this platform, but we do want to hear more about that.
It'll
do you
be
have
there.
that somewhere? It'll be there soon. Okay, great. This is what this is about, guys.
Can I go next?
Yes, you can, but give me a minute. Everybody's gonna have a chance. Hold on. May 31st I have another audience that I have to also speak to, guys. So sometimes I am gonna chime in, and as passionate as you are, that's why we've got to do this more. We got plenty of time. We're all on COVID-19 restriction. We can do this again. All we have to do is let the people know that you're going to show up and do this type of genuine exchange, because people need real change and they're not really listening for the sound bites anymore because they're disheartened. So come on, you wanted to finish. Was that Yaida or was that Rebecca?
No.
Rebecca.
I wanted to. I have.
Who's I? Rebecca.
Here's some feedback, Rebecca.
Yeah, we're having some feedback, guys. Tech team will probably reach out to you and let you know. Come on into the conversation. Hold on 1 minute, guys. I'm sorry. Rebecca?
Yes.
Are you good?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. One of the main things when you were speaking on the poverty, the stress from pregnancy, is that I actually want to create a doula program, which would take the stress off people who are during their pregnancies when they have baby mama and baby daddy dramas that's going on, and they don't have a proper pregnancy partner. With the doula program, I'm sorry, I'm having internet issues. I'm going to use my phone.
Okay, let me do this. Let me stop for a minute.
Rebecca, can I suggest to you, before you had your headphones in, you were speaking through your hands-free microphone, that was clearer.
Okay.
You took your hands-free out because you.
My internet on my computer is going in and out, and so I
keep the conversation going. Mr. Mike Austin, absolutely, I need to get you into this conversation. And guys, part of the challenge is how we started and trying to juggle. Again, if you're having any kind of technical problems, no problem, nothing's lost. Go to your text and we'll work you back into the conversation. Mr. Mike Austin, welcome to the conversation. My apologies, sir. You are running for Ward 8. And we're talking about quite a bit of conversation in that ward that you're running for. Would you bring some enlightenment to this conversation, please? Mr. Mike Austin, are you in place? While we wait for his sound bites, I'm going to go to a social media question. One of the social media questions was, how do you deal with the domestic violence issue? It concerns me in a community of young people that we do not reach those populations before they spawn out of control. Anyone want to speak in on the domestic violence? And let me stop for a minute because I haven't heard from Mr. Anthony Green, if he's still here. I haven't heard from Dr. Barker in a while. Why don't we mix it up a little and get some more voices? And Carlenia, Khalil, Monique, I see you guys in the chat room. Send me a message. Let me know what you're hearing. What are we doing about domestic violence? The social media question wants to know.
When it comes down to the can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. When it comes down to domestic violence, I often hear young girls as young as 12 speaking on
Keep talking, Rebecca.
Okay.
That's another brother that's coming in. Whoever that is, brother.
That's our tech team. Hold on. It's okay, guys. We're going to get through this. It's all right because this is some very valuable information. I'm not used to it either. I was just getting a cue that I'm sitting down off the screen. I'm so into what you guys said. I'm trying to write notes as you're talking. I'm not even thinking about the aesthetics. I'm half on the screen, but I'm in it, because we got to talk about this stuff, guys. Let me just say this. The bottom line is we all have wonderful ideas, but I think that when we come to a town as passionate as DC is about east of that river, what we've got to do is humble to what's already in place to see what that looks like, because I keep hearing, and I hear wonderful ideas, but if we're just a town of a bunch of great things, that's what happened, in my opinion, with this charter situation. They, public schools just wasn't good enough, and maybe it wasn't in some respects, but to bring something else forward should not mean that we have to put something else down if it will work. So my concern is, Mr. Anderson, with 200 nonprofits, what does the impact look? Because how do you maintain 200 nonprofits without managing or understanding the impact? And if there's no impact, why, Ms. Yaida, would they allocating funds in directions that are not coming back to the people that they're intended for? So,
and I'm glad you asked that, Rhonda, because the oversight piece, when I worked for Jim, we oversaw human services, and that was homeless services. That was former, when I said Jim, the late Jim Graham, former council member for Ward 1. The oversight piece, I think sometimes it's hard for DC to grapple. A lot of things are implemented, legislation is passed, but when it comes to oversight, it is easy to fall down to make sure those funds are allocated. And I'll give you an example. You had just a few years ago in Moulton Elementary, in Ward 8, they had, a psychiatrist and a counselor. There was funding to support those positions, right? And then you have Bernard over in Ward 4. They have funding, for social emotional staffing as well. But what ended up happening was some of the schools were using the funding that was allocated for mental health support and spending it like on something else, like an attendance counselor. right?
So-
And while an attendance counselor might be needed, what that
Right,
says is
that's
that
not
these
good.
schools are not getting enough funding at the outset if they have to use mental health funding to support an attendance counselor.
So let me
Right.
stop you there. Let me stop you there because I want to give each of you guys a chance to touch on your platform specifically because there's a question that just came in from social media that wants to understand. Look, Ron, the bottom line, how are they going to engage us? And so again, with all this wonderful dialogue we're having, I'm just wondering what the hot buttons are. And there's a survey that's going to go up at the end of this that I'm hoping social media will participate in. Because one of the ways we get services and get the management of the resources intact is we have to have input and dialogue from the community level. Let's be real. We need accountability on both sides. I've got case workers or case management workers that are telling millennial mothers they don't need to go to work. You know, that's certainly not the message we're trying to send in a system that's already frustrated and strained. I've got millennials that haven't received the proper mental health care that they need, but they're in a program called a rapid rehousing. And in 16 months, come heck or high water, in most cases, they going back to market rent. How do you put someone who is mentally exposed, trauma induced and related, and you haven't addressed it because of the lack of the resources and the lack of the accountability for the 200 agencies that could have helped them, but they find themselves out of housing. I have gone down to Virginia Williams to challenge the guidelines because you have to prove that you're homeless to get into these facilities. It's the shelter. And I'm told that it's because the young millennial mothers know how to work the system. So let's be real. We're all saying something and we all have valid points. But at the end of the day, if we can't get a core of professionals to come into this town and do something about east of that river, this gentrification that we know is going to be real enough that our babies won't have us to understand what their heritage is about. Google Anacostia Park. It's the national stadium now. There should be something said about maintaining a heritage of a people. This is not a black or white thing. This is a human thing. Our children deserve better. And so I'm making the point because health care in this city east of the river is not acceptable. We're losing a hospital in 2023. What are we going to do, Dr. Sam Noy? How are we going to get these disparities addressed?
Well, wow, that's I would have a Nobel Prize if I could answer that. I think, I think Aida said earlier, and we had this whole debate about, actions and words and what are priorities. It's not that, I think all of our providers care about babies. All of our providers care about homeless. They care about people who are incarcerated. But then the money is sort of where the mouth is at. Where do these resources go? How does it get there? And you start to see hidden priorities or people saying they have priorities, but they're not really, invested in those priorities. So I'm more interested in hearing from the candidates to hear where their priorities are, because, over at GW on our side, I think it would be entitled for me to say, well, this is how we solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have these candidates and the people on this panel come and talk to my medical students, because if our doctors don't know what's going on, they don't know where to send folks. And so we got to be working together across town to make sure that we know about the wonderful resources that are in place. But I want to hear from the candidates in the community about where they see the DC Council needing to step up, where the medical institutions need to step up, because you all know best in your ward what the issues are. And, all of them are important. Housing, pregnancy, poverty, they're all important. But where are we going to invest the resources?
Absolutely. I love that. And that's a great segue. Without any further ado, if I can get Mr. Green, if you're not on the call, we're going to start with you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Green, are you there? Okay, great. Mr. Anderson, why don't you give us in the next 4 to 5 minutes your platform? Folk want to know. Social media is asking. Dr. Sam now did a great segue. What's your priority? Why should folks vote for you? What are you going to do to help the ward?
First and foremost, Stuart Anderson will be a reliable voice, a strategic planner, and one person who will galvanize the strength of the elected leadership in the ward to put a fine-tuned kind of arrowhead on attacking certain issues. All of our issues are important. The number one issue for me will be that hospital. If I can't get it in Ward 8, I'm going to fight with Ward 7 to bring it east of the Anacostia, and I want them to expedite it like nothing else. This COVID virus has said two things fundamentally to me. It has said why we need a prison in this city. It has said to me why Ward 8 needs a hospital over here. We're not getting tested at the rate that they're getting tested all over the rest of the city and the rest of the country. One of the most important things that I think that serves to aid and assist us is having more grocery stores for our residents to actually be able to walk to save some of their meager funds by being able not to have to pay for the extra ride, because our children, we've been talking about mental health in our children. We didn't talk about diet and how diet affects mental health. Food is medicine, and we got to be able to get in the business of that. And so we got to have more grocery stores. So I want to incentivize more grocery stores in the ward. I want to push for that hospital. I want to make sure that we have development that comes into this ward that actually will bring the type of jobs that some of the other candidates have spoke about. Will bring those type of living wage jobs into the ward. But I want that development to be in sync and in line with the wishes and the desires of the people who already exist here in Ward 8. I have the relationships with many of the ANC commissioners that I believe that I can bring them to the table and we can discuss these matters and move our ward forward. The fourth and last leg of my platform will be around education. We can't talk enough about education. One of the fundamental things I think we can do in education is move money into DCPS to put extra practitioners in the classroom. We need to have additional personnel in our classroom. We can't count on parents to do what parents do up at Sidwell Friends and in other more affluent communities. Our parents are struggling themselves, and they have not realized how to really be able to carve out that time. So we need to put money in the school, so we put extra practitioners. Our children want to learn, but the environment is such that we have to create a system that allows for the children to learn.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Moving right along, I'll let them ask questions on the back end. After Mr. Anderson, Ms. Ford, will you come forward and help us understand why our constituents should vote for you and what it is that you feel that you're going to bring to the ward?
Yes, thank you. One of the I look at as far as policy is, what are some of the social determinants that have got us to this place? There is the lack of access to clean water. Some of our families live in very palpable poverty, right? So when we talk about mental health and some of these things that are trauma induced, we know that living in poverty is a trauma, right? So when we talk about the new grocery stores and the 11th Street Bridge Park and all those things, we need an approach to policy that incorporates the social determinants that have cut our kids off and our families off and have left them behind. So I will bring that a comprehensive approach to policy making. I think it goes beyond the same old advocating for economic development. We know that economic development is going to happen one way or the other, but the economic development needs to be responsive to the issues that currently exist in our ward. The economic development needs to meet the needs of the families and the individuals who've been left behind, particularly our returning citizens, our single mothers who are concerned and stressed about what's happening with their children, and they're concerned and stressed about their Black sons. I hear that all of the time. And so we need an approach to workforce development and economic development that actually addresses the concerns of our single moms, right? How is my son going to get a job? Or is my son safe going back and forth to school? That a lot of that relates back to workforce development. If we have jobs that break the cycle of poverty, then we're employing people and less people are out committing crimes. The fact that we have shut down Hope Village concerns all of us, because what type of community are we going to have in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? I don't even mean a year down the road. In the immediate future, if we haven't set up an infrastructure where our inmates can go, or our Hope Village residents can go and have their needs met and be a productive part of society. So I want to, again, bring a comprehensive approach to developing policy, but also bringing our residents' voices. Our residents feel unheard. A lot of our residents feel unheard when it comes to the critical decisions that are being made in the ward, right? Whether that's through the ANCs or whatever. But I think that one of the things that I used to see Mr. Berry do often was to have town halls. And when you were a developer, you couldn't get into Ward 8. You really couldn't get into Ward 8 unless you went past Mr. Berry. He was a gatekeeper. He made sure, whether he had a town hall at a church or at a library or on the steps of a school, you know, he made sure that the community had, there was a place that they can go to get information. And sure, not everybody attended, right? But he also represented the voice of those who were voiceless, those who couldn't attend. And so I think that that guardian at the gate is what we're missing. And I want to bring that back. I want to bring back the guardian at the gate to make sure that if you want to come in our ward to do business, you do it in a way that benefits our residents, or you'll be in for a fight. And that's what's missing. We don't have a fighter anymore guarding the ward.
All right. I love that. I love that. Thank you. And guys, Miss Rebecca Morris, hold tight for me 1 minute. I just want to let you guys know I am conscious of the time. I'm hoping that my tech team is going to allow us to chomp or gain back some of that time we lost in the beginning, just to allow the candidates to finish. There are a couple of more questions. I'm going to allow a few more reads from social media. So if you guys will stay patient with us, we do want to wrap this up, but we want to be fair to the audience that was waiting as well to hear it from you guys. Thank you so much, Aida. Very well said.
Yes,
hello, Miss Rebecca Morris. Will you come and help us understand your platform and why it is that the wonderful citizens in Ward 7 should vote? What will you do for the ward?
Well, there's so many nuances to this city that people don't necessarily they represent at the table of council. And I would love that nuances because I've been when you talk about the inadequacies when it comes down to education. I went to DC DC charter schools, and I've been in classrooms where there were no teachers and no books. Been on the can the engineer be muted?
I think that what's happening is you're experiencing enough feedback that he's concerned that it's affecting the overall broadcast. But it's okay. We're gonna keep it pushing, guys.
Do you work the remote?
Hello. We are experiencing no different technical difficulty than anyone else jumping into or shifting gears from our
Rhonda, you're muted. Rhonda, no one can hear you. You're muted. But if other people can mute. Oh. She's still muted.
We're not hearing Rhonda.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, I'm back.
Can you hear me now? No, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're going to get a chance. One of the things we're going to have to learn is that this social media, we don't have control. You know what I'm saying? And so even when we're in the middle of a wonderful statement, it's just going to be like that. That's the beauty of growing up in a Ward 8, because you learn how to be a jack of all trades and you learn how to go with the flow. So I think that that's something too that our audience is going to be paying attention to, because obviously people interview well, but when you get in the trenches, and I want to come on, Rebecca, I'm sorry, I don't want to get going. You come on and finish your conversation. Thank you for your patience and understanding.
The two main things, there's so many nuances to our city that people don't necessarily see. And when they come before the council, they aren't speaking for us. They're not talking for us. And there needs to be someone who can speak for us. When, for instance, when the grocery stores, when you look inside a lot of the grocery stores we have, the companies aren't providing PPEs to the workers during a pandemic. The council members aren't signing none of the businesses. These are certain nuances that we should see. The main two things I would love to see, not only for our education system to be boosted up and to be properly funded, and not only just throw money at children, to make sure they're receiving a quality education. It's very easy to find 15-year-olds who cannot read. Over at HD Woodson, 95% of the students are reading below average. Only 8% of the students at HD Woodson can do math at an average level. these are certain things that are in our city, and we talk about why people aren't receiving jobs or why people are going straight to jail when they're coming out of high school, or why people are going into trouble. These are proper reasons why, and certain these things that honestly just need to change. And the two main things that I would like to have within our ward, and it's all over DC, is the mental health hub, a mental health hub within each community where people can just walk to. That would solve a lot of the issues and a lot of the problems. Our main thing, when we talk about support of the community, there's so many single women here and they're going through their pregnancy alone. I would love there to be a doula program, and I would love for workforce development to create a doula program so women can learn to become doulas and support women, and women can use their insurances. Women are allowed to use their insurance to pay for these doulas. So not only do they have the support of someone who a positive reinforcement during their pregnancy, to someone they can talk to during their stress, and someone to talk to when certain things are happening, because we don't have hospitals. We have someone who's always there. And
yes, valid point. I want to make sure you didn't wrap. Did you want to wrap up on the doula conversation, or did you have something else? I want to be fair to Mr. Hill, who's waiting as well.
I'm almost finished.
No, that's fine. Great.
So when we talk about that, when people are going through stress, I would love for this to see the cities fund that and have our insurance pay for that. So not only will we have a new community who's being supported by their friend who's a doula, but we have women who's able to make $100,000 a year to be able to charge. That's a new economy for women in our city. And a lot of our women, they want to work. Imagine your grandmother, and you can be a doula at any age, your grandmother getting out there and getting her certificate and making $100,000 a year, and to be able to say, oh, I birthed my granddaughter and my neighbors and a whole community of people. Okay. These are things that we need.
Thank you. That you brought a different perspective, so I appreciate that. That's why we should do this. Mr. Hill, would you do me a favor? Because one of the things that we did our research, and I'm not sure what the status of the candidacy is. I'm sure it's active, but at some point when we called the election board, we didn't get your information as that being the case. So would you help our listening audience, our viewing audience, understand that you are running and how they can reach you and what your platform is and how it is you intend to represent the ward and why they should vote for you?
Absolutely. Thank you. I am a write-in what we call a write-in candidate, and it is a position that people in the ward will get a chance to exercise their belief that I am the right candidate. One of the things that I take quite a bit of pride in is that the last 16 years, I've been an employer, as I said earlier, to many people here in the district. When it comes to the opportunities of changing someone's life, if we don't give someone the opportunity to create, to have an opportunity to earn a living wage, then we only set them further back and further behind than anyone else.
I agree.
I've been a known voice for small businesses across the District of Columbia. I've also been a known voice who have brought challenge to the council, to our city administrators when these things affected Ward 8 residents. They did. The fact of the matter is, Ward 8 is 10 years behind every sector of the that we've allowed. Our current council person has allowed the voice of the people to not be heard repeatedly. I've taken the time to go to the council member to present challenges. And that's why I got in this race. I got in this race late. However, I got in this race because I not wanted to see another 4 years go by where we don't have a trauma center on the east end of DC. We have right now the greatest food desert across the city. And here's what I've done. I've met with local farmers who have now decided that if we could have distribution centers, which would be two grocery stores that are owned by the residents of Ward 8, not a major grocery store, but two grocery stores that are owned by the residents of Ward 8, those who want to invest. Those local grocers will be able to bring, or farmers will be able to bring, the fruits and vegetables that don't include the harmful pesticides, that don't include the harmful fertilizer.
Mhm.
I'm also a recent cancer survivor. And that's where I learned about the right diet
Mhm.
for a long period of time that can help change some of the things that our residents are involved in. Developers right now need to have, and someone touched on it earlier, but this is what I learned also from the late Marion Barry when he helped my business grow so many years ago. And you're right. He did say to the developers that if you want to play in my backyard, then you're going to play by the rules that we're going to establish, and it's going to be fair for everyone. We don't have that push right now.
Mhm.
And as I called the current council member, Trayon White, on the day that I decided to get in this race, which was 2 days left before I could file, that's why I ended up being a write-in.
Mhm.
I called him to say that my axe is going to be sharper and my swing is going to be mightier. It was nothing personal. I've watched how in the previous election, the last two elections, how there were more of a bag grabbing mentality than caring about the people. We have senior citizens right now that cannot afford medicine and their food because their property taxes went so high due to gentrification, which is a good thing. However, how's it good if they cannot afford to stay there, at least buy their food and their medicine? Our youth right now that are coming home from college with PhDs and masters are not even getting jobs that's paying $60,000 a year here in Washington, D.C. And in Ward 8, you can't even afford a house now with $60,000 because HPAP is the cutoff at $60,000. So that's forcing more of our people to go outside of the city. You know, and as I said earlier, my seniors, I am pushing to have absolutely no taxes on anyone over 65 years old. This is not something I need to make up. It's 13 other states that have already done it. We have the platform, we have the pathway to do it. We just need to have someone strong enough to step out there. And when I say to my youth that are young graduates from college, I am one person who am pushing for you to have any college tuition. And so, you know, these are things I'm already working on so that when I take office, we're going to move and hit the ground running. These are things that I'm not waiting on. The returning citizens or my reentry centers that are laid out on my platform is key because the challenges I faced with Hope Village was ridiculous. There are other organizations that I've already been in discussion with that have very successful records in high dollar neighborhoods that they have a returning reentry center. So it doesn't have to be in the worst part of the city. We need to get away from that being the normal way of thinking.
Mhm.
One of the other things that I recently came into is that when you talk about jobs and opportunity, 10 years ago, I called the people the gatekeepers of Ward 8. Blew an opportunity from a major auto manufacturer who wanted to put a training facility at St. Elizabeth. And these same gatekeepers cost Ward hundreds of jobs. And these jobs that would have come from that manufacturing plant would have been 90 to six-figure incomes, 90,000 to 100,000.
I'm starting to stop you. Do you have this on your platform somewhere where we can
I
help
sure do.
folks to go and get further? Will you move forward and help them understand where they can get more of this wonderful information?
Yes, if you go to my website at fredhillward8.com, you can reach out there and we will give you all the information. There's also commercials that we're doing right now that will bring that information toward everyone.
Great. What I want to do now, panel, because I know that it's drawing long because we started late. Couple of things I want to point out. I want to give social media and my folks in the chat room an opportunity to reach out and ask whatever questions that they don't feel that they've had an opportunity to be represented by. Because as an advocate for families in Ward 8, as an advocate for members in the community who have been exposed to sexual advances from their caseworkers and things like that, I can tell you that now more than ever, our disenfranchised folks need strong leadership. This was not designed to bash anyone, but I want to speak up as an advocate for the families from 7 and 8. I cannot imagine in a state of emergency why either the council member or a representative from their office would make themselves or avail themselves to be able to show up and let folks know on every meeting that they understand. In a city and in their wards where mental health is such a challenge for the families that they're servicing, they didn't have the time. So what we've got to start doing is challenging the mindsets that decides that the priority is not with the people. And we got to be careful that they're not hiding behind COVID-19. People are really hurting. And I want to make a point, Mr. Candidates and Miss Candidates. Dr. Sam Noy, a couple of comments back, offered the opportunity for you guys to come up and talk to his med students so that they could be further engaged and connected to the work and to the issues and the policies and try to see if we can get more done. We are living in a state of emergency, and out of everyone's platform, no one's platform has adjusted itself in this setting to at least address the folks that are out there disheartened, not getting mental services as a result of the COVID-19 having gone into it without mental services. One of the things that bugged me is when they put the soundbite up of the fish market, or they put the soundbite up of our kids at the playground. The reality for our families, the toxic, stress exposed ones that started in the womb, the reality for them is that not even a COVID-19 will reverse the abuse that they're already living with. Some of them can't stay closed up in them houses. So my dear council members, we thought it was necessary to host this platform because in a town where mental health resources are so scarce, in a town where we are number one in self-medicating and being addicted, we've got to have candidates that come forward and abandon yesterday's protocol and exist on today's need. Nothing of what you just said means anything if I have family members being taken from their family, living apart for 14 days, what could be their last days of their living, and we don't have a plan. And you said it yourself, Mr. Hill, we don't have a trauma center. And that brings me back full circle. Am I Mother's Keeper and our wonderful doctors that participated today have also been assisting us in the background from an adversarial standpoint. From an advisory standpoint, because we too saw the drought. We too were frustrated that we didn't have trauma hubs, or we didn't have resource management, or we didn't have the ability to come together like we are now in a state of emergency and be a resource. I'm sure that my social media viewing public is a little disturbed that we have not addressed COVID-19, what that means for them, and what your platforms are adjusting or adapting, because let's be real, everybody's adjusting and adapting. I had to take a hit today, but I know the importance of this content. I know that stigma is real. So it is what it is. But I'm going to tell you something. Our families are hurting. And just because you want it doesn't mean they do. So I would say to each of you guys, because I think you're all very intelligent and very wonderful in your independent natures. But the problem is, as Mr. Hill was touching on, we have been a town and east of a river with stagnant, I said it, stagnant and content leadership. And they have not adapted or adjusted to the folks that they're supposed to be serving. When did public service become so celebrity? What is this clique thing? They tell me one of the last elections, they got to fighting or raising up. How in the world can you justify that kind of behavior when you are responsible for so many people that are going without? And I'm going to ask each one of you, when is the last time you ran your household with $15,000? The reality of what these kids and what these families are living through was already a problem before COVID-19. So God bless you guys. I'm a daughter of schizophrenia. My mom didn't know anybody. She had to suffer through and figure it out. And many families are like that. And so I challenge each of you all in your campaigns as we get through this COVID-19. I hope you get to build all these wonderful buildings and things, but please do me a favor. Get in touch with our community on the level that lets them know that you care, because when you do that, we can increase the voting from the less than 9% that happened in 8 and the less than 13% that happened in 7. So I don't know council members right now east of this river that have it so good in a state of emergency that they're not available. And let's keep it 100. They're not that busy. We just talked about the fact that so many people don't have what they need. So what are they busy doing? We got 200 nonprofits east of the river in Ward 8, and we got families that don't have masks, can't eat. You just told me. And then we're going to go a step further. We're going to lose a hospital in 2023. We already ascertained that we have no trauma resources. We have no emergency. So we're about to be like all the big churches, all the 50 churches. We can come together and be one and really service the needs of our people. Guys, I just really am passionate about the fact that our people need so much, but they're so disconnected. You guys chose politics. You said you wanted to do this, so I applaud you. But if you're going to do this, help those of us on the ground truly change some things. Challenge the status quo. Am I Mother's Keeper uses our platforms to educate our folk. We had to do something different. Oh, nonprofits shouldn't be political. It is political when we got folks that won't allocate funds, that will cut school funding, that will not look at how we can feed our people, that will not come out and put a mask over their face, but have the audacity not to show up for a virtual podcast.
Can I say something?
Please say something, Carlenia.
You know, I, for the first time, have been out in Ward 7 and 8, passing out food to our families. And I just have to say, I know I heard you say several times, this is not a black and white thing. It's a black and white thing, because when you look at the wards, you look at the numbers, and you look at the statistics, you can draw a line right down the middle of the city, and you can tell where the white people live and where the black people live. So at the end of the day, this has to do with white supremacy and racism. It's the system that we operate under, but we have to have a leadership that is willing to step in there and challenge every single one of those council members who toe the line. The only reason Trump is in the presidency, whether he lies and he does what he does, but he tells his truth. Even though it changes, he tells his truth every single time. And he does not care what anybody else thinks about him or what they say. And everybody else that was running for president was giving those sound bites. Dying out there. I went out with Stu and you, Rhonda, and we went out, I believe that was Ward 8, and our men were so hungry. My car, and I cried. I'm like, this is ridiculous. And like you said, I don't even know who the council member is. I think it's Mr. White. There's no reason why he should not be on here or have a representative. And maybe he has a representative. I don't know. I don't really like politics too much, so I really admire you guys stepping up and doing what you're doing. But there's no excuse. Our families are dying, and you know they got all these. For how you educate homeless children. People need a home in order to have stability to handle everything else. That's just a basic human right. The racism, the white supremacy, it has gone on too long. And unless we're willing to take a stand, it's like being in an abusive relationship. Mental health all day. When you live 24/7 under racism, white supremacy, it's stress. When you live on that side, I lived in Ward 6 for 20 years, and I had never seen what I saw in these past few days in our community. I was absolutely shocked going into the community with you a few months ago, being introduced to somebody and hearing gunshots, and I'm shocked, and I'm wondering why nobody is calling 911, and I'm like, this is like you're living under siege.
Another day. It's just another day.
Unacceptable.
You're right. But now is the time to sound that alarm. And that's exactly why we're doing this. And the reality is this, guys, it's 7:52. I want to take a minute to thank every one of you, because you could all be doing something else, but you know the importance of this. And I tell you something, we think that this is a bad thing. The COVID-19 overall is, but the reality of the results that will come out of it, we will be a stronger people by default, because we have to come together and talk about things, because we're being forced to come back to the table and to be able to address the very thing that we've come away from. We've always been a resilient people. We've always taken care of our own. And what we've got to do is return back to those types of values. And the truth of the matter is, there are only 2 seats out there. Only 2 of you guys can advance, right? And I'm hoping that all of you guys advance, because I say that it takes a village to do the work that we're talking. There are many seats, and you've been watching the same news that I've been watching, and you've been getting the same sound bites and seeing the same things on the ground. There are many seats that we need to be understanding, that need to be shored up if our babies and our ward and our families are going to progress. We are in gentrification. We have no time. We have no time. So God bless you guys for running. Social media has been buzzing. I'm going to invite social media, if there are questions that you didn't get in, if there's anything that you would like for me to be able to address to one of the candidates or one of the panel members, please send us your questions, because we're going to do this again. As a matter of fact, I would like for my team to go ahead and put the survey up. We've already got prepared with surveys, because we wanted to be able to push this dialogue. We want you as candidates to know, in fact, that you guys do have their attention. And if you don't, I would just ask you, between now and June 2nd, because they have to mail in, let's be real. We want them to do something that they didn't do when they could physically go and do it. We've got to have real conversations if we're going to help folks get to the point to where we can extend and increase their quality of living. The final piece I wanted to share with this mental health conversation, and with trauma as we know it, it is important that we help people to re-understand what they think they know mental health to be. Because when I say physical health, no one's feeling some kind of way or being annoyed. But when they put the words mental health, why doesn't that mean just strong in your mind? Why doesn't that just mean having strong support systems? Why doesn't that take you into a preventative understanding? Because we're all living with stress. And what we know is that stress is a gateway. And if we don't have a food to eat, we don't have a job to go to, we're going to deteriorate into that. If we come out of a relationship the wrong way, we are challenged possibly in our mental health if we don't shore up. Just like we have to build up our immune system, we have to strengthen our mental capacities. And as I tell my young ones in the street, baby, your swag needs to not just be physically attractive, your swag needs to be mentally attractive. Because if you don't have it together and you're going through something and you're challenged because you're worried about what someone's going to say, that's just unhealthy. And eventually you're not going to be able to do that for much longer. And so I employ you guys running for office with all the wonderful knowledge that you have, knowing that only 2 of you can get in. Please stay in our wards and help our families, and let's figure it out, because all of you guys are saying some beautiful things, and we can do this together. And we truly don't have to wait for someone to do it. And we certainly do know about the other systems that are in place. But I've learned how to not talk about third-party conversations that I can't control. I'm going to deal with what I can control. And what that means is that every opportunity that I have to let Mr. Phil Mendelson, Mr. Trayon White, Mr. Vincent Gray, and everybody in between that does not think that it is a state of an emergency before COVID-19 to take care of our families east of the river. I am a product of Mayor Berry's Summer Youth Program. He did for us what no one is doing for our children. He gave us the opportunity to dream beyond those borders that we were being raised in. And we owe it to his legacy to give our children that same opportunity to dream. My babies, your babies did not know who Tiger Woods was, Mr. and Mrs. Candidates. We've got work to do east of the river. God bless all of you beautiful people for coming out and doing this. We're going to do it on May 31st. I know that there were some kinks, but I have every faith in my wonderful SAB media because they've been holding me down. You guys can't see what's been going on behind the scene. So God bless them. God bless you all. And I would hope that social media would send me those questions so I can keep you guys engaged and hold you guys accountable. Any last words or any last remarks for our beautiful audience?
Yes, I've been fighting to the city council member to hold businesses accountable of not providing cashiers with PPE or protection. I haven't received a letter back about having fines about that. They just sent out a general letter. So if you all, I can't do it by myself.
That's right.
So if you all will write to our city council, I wrote a letter to Robert White, but if you guys will all just write a letter out to, just for protection, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and if we're not holding Safeway or Dollar Tree responsible for not providing masks to their workers or gloves to their workers, and then passing on germs or or getting coronavirus and dying later, we're not holding people responsible or these companies responsible. We're all doing all of us a disservice because they are the community. I go there, and I'm also just like to let you know that I'm a server, so I'm affected by the coronavirus. Not the pandemic, but I'm affected by it all. So I just want you guys to just go out there and just write a letter to and reinforce that people come before companies.
That's right. That's right. God bless you. You're right. I second that. And what I will offer for each of you all as you build and continue your campaigning, if there are issues that you're trying to drum up support, we're on the ground. We're talking to the community and we're trying to keep them engaged. We'd love for you to let us know what you need. And like we went out there and came together to go and feed the families. This is a people issue. This isn't politics. The politics happen. We've got to save our people. So My Mother's Keepers platform is available to all of you all because you guys stood up where no one else did, and you guys are speaking out where no one else is. So, or folks are challenged to do so. But I would say to you, please, guys, if you would just take it a step further and help our people really engage with your campaign so that we will be the benefactor from higher numbers in the polls.
Can I say something, Rhonda?
Please do.
Let me say something. Okay, so I would employ each and every one of the candidates and everybody here on this panel. It was some things that was written that pretty much this COVID-19 is a way whereas they want to get rid of a third of the population on the globe. If we don't start thinking bigger, we are going to lose. So you have to wonder, am I a third that you want to get rid of? Am I a third? So with each one of your views and each one of your things, you have to know that even on east of the river, with Carlina said, unfortunately, they always say, oh, it's a different world over there in Southeast and Northeast. And that is wrong. It's one world, one city, one,
I've got Chaplain Timothy Buffalo dialing in, guys. He should be coming in.
Pandemic going on. Don't let it be an excuse. Don't let it be an excuse. Hop this ground later for the letters, knock on their doors and say, look at here. This is what we're not going to have. We have got to save these people. They're not even allowed to go into the store without a mask. That says to me, oh, I don't have a mask, which means I can't get no food to eat. I can't keep the protein rolling in my brain, in my body. You understand what I'm saying? No, it's not no mask going around. Yes, it is a shortage around the world for medical supplies. A mask is a medical supplies, but now we don't have it. Sure, I can put a bandana around me, but that's only 18% of safety. N95 is 95% of safety. N95. If they're not giving that type of mask, That's what we need to survive. Gloves, yes. No gloves on the shelves. That's what we need. That's my rant.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. What's up?
So, as the next Ward 8 City Council, the plan is this. You elect Stuart Anderson, #1 on the ballot. The very first thing that I do is create one aim, one mission, one ward. That is convening all of the leadership. I've been typing throughout this entire piece.
Yeah.
I've been sharing this message. The idea for moving Ward 8 forward is to get the elected leadership in the ward on the same playing field. The other thing that I will pledge to do moving forward, because I understand what Monique was just talking about, and it affects Ward 7 and Ward 8 in stride. So I'm going to commit to working with the leadership, not only in Ward 8, as I have been doing over the years, but also with the leadership in Ward 7 to ensure we get, as I say, that hospital that we gotta have over here. We want something with trauma tube capability. We gotta have that. We gotta begin to look at how do we fix education. We got a bureaucracy problem in education, and we have a behavioral problem because there's not enough help in the classroom. We gotta get more help in that classroom. Employment-wise, we've already talked about that. So again, I'm Stuart Anderson, and I'm hoping that everybody who has a chance to have been a part of this, and everybody who gets to see this after the fact, that you will consider everything that has been said. And if there's something that hasn't been said, I've been sharing my information. Send it to me so that we can look at it together and resolve these problems. I'm on the ground every day, before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and I will be there after the pandemic. Thank you for having this forum. I appreciate the opportunity to have been here and express my thoughts and ideas.
Guys.
Rhonda, can I close on this?
Sure, you can. Come on, you can.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you for having this panel and holding the candidates' feet to the fire. One of the things that exasperates me to no end when I do these panels is hearing political rhetoric over and over. And I hear the same rhetoric at all the panels that I participate on, and I know this won't be the last one. But I want to remind people that we will continue to hear this rhetoric coming from the halls of the John Wilson Building unless we get out there and vote. May 22nd, early voting is wide open. And I know that and I think this is an unintended consequence. Some people will be disenfranchised by this format change of the election. And I'm really concerned about our seniors being disenfranchised by having to mail in a request for an absentee ballot. The council has passed some emergency legislation to waive the signature requirement and different things, but the fact is it's still going to be harder. And you made the point. They wasn't doing it when we didn't have the pandemic. Right. So now it's going to be harder, but I want to remind people, if you are like me and you're tired of hearing this rhetoric, the same rhetoric every election cycle, and that same rhetoric echoes right into the halls of the John Wilson Building, please get out there and vote. And my campaign team, we will be assisting people filling out their mail-in request ballots. We're working directly with the Board of Elections to get our seniors, particularly the mail-in request form. So please contact me, yaidaford.com. My email is dcward8@yaidaford.com, and we will assist you in getting your absentee ballot. Thank you so much, Rhonda, for doing this.
The pleasure's all mine. You guys don't need an invitation. Look, I had to take the darts today. I don't mind because I'll be back because this is what we do. Those of us that come from the war, we come up fighting. So, we're not afraid of a little work. You know what I'm saying? But the truth of the matter is, guys, I applaud all of you all. Our city needs better leadership, especially east of the river. I don't know what this culture is about tiptoeing around it. Nobody got time for that. Families are hurting. Every day we don't act and change it, families go home to it. We have an initiative out. Enough is enough. ENUFF. Our first enough is every night under fire and fear. Our babies are going to bed without. They're expecting us to fix it. Be accountable, hold our city accountable. If you need My Mother's Keepers platform to educate, I am a block captain with When We All Vote. I serve on the UPO board of Health Advisory Council. I am a landlord for Miriam's Kitchen. I do this because there are people such as my family that didn't know anybody. So the politics has to be done. We get that. But guys, God bless you all. There's a survey going around. Please answer it. If you want to hear more from these candidates, let us know. Candidates, please reach out to Am I Mother's Keeper if there's more that we can do to help you guys get out into the community. We just care that the community has a viable choice. We have 2 sitting council members who are probably going to have an edge on you because it's COVID-19 and people will probably not be motivated to act. I implore you to help pass your passion on. Transfer that passion you feel for running this city so we can motivate our people to get up and vote. If you need us to help you guys bust them seniors up there to do whatever, I challenge you guys to work with Am I Mother's Keeper so that we can be vigilant about changing the leadership east of this river. Because Marbury, if he came back, he'd have a fit at what he saw. He took care of his babies and his seniors. Don't get it twisted. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful, safe, healthy journey. We keeping an eye on you. We peeping in on your campaigns. Don't trip up. We watching. To God be the glory. Thank you all. I can't tell you enough for being so patient. Reach out to us. We're going to do this again on May 31st. There's a series of information that's going to go on the screen regarding the voting. June the 2nd is the magic date. I understand that they're supposed to mail you your ballots, but don't wait for it. Candidates, make sure that my folks know what's going on. I want to hear the talk out there. I want to build this grassroots so we never have to be here again.
Yes. Thank you.
We are a good team. We have many seats east of this river that we can be taking a look at because only 2 of us going to get in, but we still going to be out here soldiers for our ward. How about that gatekeeping? I'll sign up. I'll take a shift. You know what I'm saying?
That's
right. Bless you guys. See you guys soon.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're not going to do the after party because of how we started, but we got it done. Thank you all.
Bye. Good night.
Good night. Let's save some lives. Goodbye, Ward 7, Ward 8, east of the river soldiers. Let's go.